Pleasure to have you with us today. How are you doing?
I'm doing really well. We're having a gorgeous day in Austin, Texas, clear blue skies, sunny, great temperatures. It's all good.
It's very, very gloomy outside here in Germany. The
I'm
temperatures
sorry.
are super low, and it's gray outside. So I'm
Okay.
happy for you. Before we get into talking about our questions in customer centricity and marketing circle of traction framework, can you briefly explain the listeners who you are and what you do?
So for the last 21 years, I have been at the helm of VisionEdge Marketing. We started here in Austin, Texas, and are a global company. We serve customers predominantly in the B2B world, and our roots are in data analytics, process, and measurement. And our focus is on helping our customers use that to grow, to create more customer value, and to improve performance.
You have also written multiple books. You are the author of Measure What Matters, Metrics in Action, and the most recent one, Fast Track Your Business. So you are in some sense a serial writer. What's your process around writing a book, and what advice would you have for people who want to start writing?
Okay, that's a really good question. And I'm going to start by this. First of all, there's the reason I didn't go on to get my PhD when I came out of graduate school many decades ago is I was terrified of having to write a dissertation. So I just want to put that out there. I had been in graduate school. My writing really was compared to my peers. I always felt like I was struggling, and I left sort of feeling not very good about my writing skills. So for anyone listening, I want you to know that you can overcome that if that's how you feel. I ended up in various jobs in my career. I spent 14 years of my career, which was as long, if not a little bit longer than my time here at VisionEdge Marketing, in the semiconductor space. And I was encouraged to write. And so I had an opportunity to do more writing, very technical writing, at Motorola, and earn what was known as silver quills, which is what they gave to authors who were published. And it kind of got me over the hurdle of having someone behind me encouraging me, who said, "We promise it will all look good when it's all said and done. We're not going to hang you out to dry because it's our reputation too." Yeah. So that was very helpful to be part of a company. And I would encourage anyone also wanting to write that might be young writing takes practice every day, but when you have an environment that is supportive, it makes a big difference, right? And when you are writing for a company and it is their brand, they're going to help you, and they're going to ensure that it reflects well on them as well as it reflects well on you. Yeah. So that kind of got me in a place where I felt more comfortable about writing. And of course, eventually, when I stepped into this role, content became important, not just writing for our customers in terms of the things that we do for them, reports and whatnot, and content emerged. There wasn't anyone else to write them but me. So again, started having to do writing. And I want to tell you how the first couple of books came about. And I think that will tell you a little bit more about the process. And it is true for this book as well. So the very first book, which was Gone Fishing, so there's 4 books, Gone Fishing, came out, and it was a result of a lot of work we were doing with customers around how to align marketing and sales in a way that will help you sync up with your customer's buying journey. And this was in 2001, before people even used words like that, right? So, and it was a very simple book, and it was really about how marketing and sales go fishing for customers. And we use a lot of fishing metaphors and fishing ideas. That's going to seep into the work, into this conversation. The second book, which was Measure What Matters, was in response to an article that someone had written about measuring marketing. And I began to write a response to them. And one of my members of our team said, your response is getting rather lengthy. It had been turned into pages and pages. I was really on a rant. And he said, why don't you rethink, instead of doing a rant, why don't you think about writing a book? Because we really could use a book on this topic, because this is a space that we are experts in. Mm-hmm. And we really should get out there and talk more about measuring marketing and how to do it well. And hence, that was the impetus for that book. So back to Fast Track and my process. Usually a book, I'm not really someone who just says, oh, I think I want to write a book. Usually there is something that is a catalyst that brings the book into fruition. And that is the same with Fast Track. It's usually someone who says something to me and sort of encourages me to think perhaps a little bit different, take a little different view of what I was doing, and then turn that into something. And Fast Track is no different. So we have, back to Circle of Traction, we've been using the Circle of Traction in our company pretty much since we started. One of our customers that we have worked with for many, many years, John Jacko, who's now with Pentair, had asked me in one of his earlier places that he worked to do a workshop on growth. And in that workshop, I introduced the Circle of Traction. And over the course of his career, he's brought me into various companies to do this workshop on growth. And a few years ago, when he brought me in to do this workshop on growth, again, for Pentair, he said to me, do you think you'll ever put the Circle of Traction into a book? It might make a good book. And I said, no, I'm done writing books. I came home from that meeting and got into conversations internally and conversations with other CEOs we work with who said, the Circle of Traction might be worth writing about. And hence, that was the process. And because the Circle of Traction is a framework, it was easy, Rachit, to build a book around the framework. It really wasn't very hard because the framework itself allowed us to organize the book in such a way as to take everybody through the process of how you would use the Circle of Traction if you were interested in that kind of a process for growth.
What's your advice for people who want to start writing?
Start writing. No, literally. So there's two things that I think help people write. One is being an avid reader, right? You need to be a good reader, I think, as well, to be a good writer. Yeah. And then writing takes practice. Start writing. Do some writing. Maybe the first pieces won't be good. Get a good copy editor to help you. There's some good tools out there that can help with writing. I think one of them is Grammarly. I encourage my team that writes to use Grammarly. It can give you some instant feedback into your own writing. Read things that you find interesting, your voice, your style that works for you. If you're good at talking, one of the things that can be helpful is say your words out loud and then transcribe them and use that as the base. There's lots of different ways to approach writing. I don't think there's any one way other than you have to start and you'll get better and you have to practice. I think you have to write regularly to get better at it.
You already mentioned the Circle of Traction framework. What is the framework all about?
The framework is really about how to start the growth process with customers being your starting point. So it's a wheel, and the wheel begins with customer and opportunity insights, which, as Rachit, given your background in data and analytics, it basically says you start with insights that you derive from data to help you make better decisions for your organization. And like all wheels, it sits on an axle or a shaft. And one of the primary fundamental components of that axle, because the wheel cannot turn without a good axle, is data and analytic skills. So you've got to have some fundamental things for the wheel to turn. You've got to have a culture that's customer-centric, an organization designed around that, the right kinds of people with skills, processes and infrastructure to support it, and then the data and analytics capabilities to drive it. If you have those fundamental things, then the wheel will turn. If you don't have those things, you might find yourself, not being able to go very far, very fast because the wheel wouldn't have what it needs for forward momentum.
Let's also talk about customer centricity a little bit. A lot of companies talk about customer centricity on paper, but they are not able to translate that into action. It could be, when you have to come up with excuses, you could have budget restrictions, you could be short on time, you could be short on resources. What do you think? Why do most companies only have a lip service towards customer centricity and are not able to act on it?
It's a great question. And we have this conversation with folks quite a bit. And it has to do, again, with starting with culture, because culture is the start of all things. So if you're an organization that believes in being customer-centric, and is designing itself to be that way, you're going to have a very different kind of culture than other cultures might be. So that's where it starts. And you find that if you find companies that are not making forward movement, then one of the first things to look at is, well, does their leadership team really truly believe in being a customer-centric organization? Is that really what they're about? Do they promote people who are customer-centric? Do they hire people who are customer-centric? Do they have values that suggest that they are customer-centric, right? For example, responding to customers, how you treat a customer, solving customer problems, enabling and empowering your team to solve customer problems, enabling innovation to be around customer problems, those kinds of questions. And the answer is no, you're not going to make forward movement, right? If you still believe that your focus is on something else, then it is about focus, right, Rachit?
Yeah.
Because people who run companies only have 24/7. They can't do it all. So they have to decide where they're going to invest. And and it really is about making an investment, but it's not just a financial investment. It's your own philosophical time investment. So I often ask leadership people, how much time do you spend talking to customers? That's a good starting point. And if I find that the leadership team doesn't spend much time talking to customers, I consider that a red flag. So one of the things I always admired about the people I worked with in my career, not as a VisionEdge marketing person, but in the companies I worked for, is how much time the leadership team spent with customers. And almost every single place I worked that was successful, the leadership team talked to customers frequently. Not every once in a while, not in a blue moon, not when there was a problem, but frequently, with intention. They were intentional about talking to customers.
What are some bad examples that you have seen around customer centricity? Because Laura, you work with a lot of CEOs and a lot of companies. Do you have some examples around times when the companies were thinking that they were being customer centric, but eventually they were actually being the opposite?
I don't want to focus too much on bad examples. I think that companies are recognizing that in today's world, the customer is in charge. As Forrester said a few years ago, we're in the age of the customer. And customers are more and more empowered. There's enough data out there to say, look, customers are making decisions, whether they're B2C or B2B, without talking to people inside the company. That they are consuming content, doing their research, doing whatever, and making decisions, whether that's on their own or with colleagues, long before they ever contact a company and place an order, right?
Yeah.
So the customer's in charge. As a leadership team, don't recognize that, you're probably in trouble. People talk about mapping the customer journey. That's great. One of the other things that we talk about is, do you have a customer experience map? Do you understand what experiences your customers have in their interactions with your company, and how they perceive those experiences, and which of those experiences are critical to finding, keeping, and growing more customers, right? So oftentimes I'll ask them, and they haven't even thought about that. They haven't really discussed that. You're going to ask me about books to read, and I'm going to suggest a book right now. And one of the books is the book Moments of Truth. I'm a huge believer in moments of truth when it comes to being customer centric. I think that is the best indicator of whether or not a company truly is customer centric, is those moments of truth, those specific interactions where the customer and an employee intersects with each other, and the employee has an opportunity in that moment to do something in the benefit of the customer, the right thing by the customer. And if the answer is they don't, then I think that tells you everything there is to know about the customer. So I'm going to share two stories real quickly, and you can edit these out if you need to, Rachit, that I think would be helpful. Examples of moments of truth. One is with Discover card. And I'll share a bad example as well. I'll share two good ones and one bad one, and you decide what you want to use these with. One is with Discover, which is a credit card company. And I'm usually a huge advocate of Discover. And used Discover, I don't use them quite so much today for various reasons, but am still quite loyal to them. I had an issue, a billing issue, and I was a longstanding customer who paid their bill regularly on time, and I had a longstanding issue. Called up the front line, I've discovered, with my issue. And in many companies, you just have this AVR system you have to go through. You have a million other people you have to go to. Nobody can solve your problem right away. And instead, the person that answered my phone said, "No problem. I will resolve that right now." They were empowered to fix the problem. That was a moment of truth. They could have said, I'm sorry, I can't do that. I'm not in charge of that. That's not my department. It's whatever, right? All kinds of things. They just said they were empowered by their leadership team. They could solve this problem, and they did. And that's a moment of truth. I'll give you another example of a good moment of truth. And I'm using B2C examples because I think most people can relate to these, but these occur in B2B just as easily. So I am a very big coffee drinker.
Yeah.
Everyone who knows me knows this, that you basically just plug me up in the morning intravenously to a cup of coffee and just keep it going all day long. And as we're all working from home now, I have invested in a Keurig machine, like many other people have, so that we can have our coffee. And I placed an order for K-cups. My Keurig machine uses those little K-cups. You're probably familiar with them. And I love the idea of K-cups because I have now become a flavored coffee person, a snob, flavored coffee snob. I buy all the different kinds of flavored coffee. But in one of my orders, I ordered the wrong format. It wasn't a K-cup. It was some other format. And it was operator error. Clearly, I ordered them. I could see that I ordered them. And when they arrived, I didn't know what to do. So I called up the Keurig people. And the people, again, totally empowered, I said, I need to place a new order for these. I ordered the wrong form factor, not all of them, but like 2 or 3 of the boxes were wrong. I'm happy to send them back. I cannot use them. And I'm happy to order the ones I need. And the lady on the Keurig line said, "You don't need to do that. You cannot send them back because we cannot take them back. You can give them away or whatever would make you happy. Just donate them. Or maybe a neighbor uses them. Yeah. And no worries. I will send you the correct ones that you need in the flavor that you want. And there's no charge. They're on their way."
That's amazing.
That is a moment of truth.
Customer experience.
Right. So companies know, right? They understand where those experiences are going to occur and how to translate those into positive customer experiences that people share stories like this. And those are moments of truth. So I just want to mention to your audience, that is an indicator of whether or not the company is customer centric. And I have one example I'm going to share of since you wanted a bad example, I'll share a moment of truth that is a bad example. Would you like to hear it?
Yes, please.
Okay. So in America, as you know, we have telephones. We still have landline telephones that are voice over IP that are also with companies that offer television and internet service and whatnot. And one of those companies is Time Warner. Since I've been so generous about mentioning companies who've done it well, I'm going to share this example of someone who did not do it well, Time Warner. And Time Warner was recently acquired a few years ago by Comcast.
Yeah.
And my husband has been a customer since 1979 of this company, cable company. Okay, 1979. A few years ago, so we're talking a few years ago, as in 2018, 19.
Yeah.
So let's say 2019, maybe about a year or so ago. Mm-hmm. So that would be how many years? 40 years.
Yeah.
We've been a customer, paying on time, writing a check. That's a lot of money.
Yeah.
So they were raising their rates, but the service quality was really going down. So when I called them up, I said, "I'd like to talk to you about your rates. This is not working for us anymore. You've gotten out of whack with what you're providing." And I understood why, because people are abandoning these companies, going to other alternatives, right? Mm-hmm. And so their revenues are going down. So how are they compensating for that? They're raising their rates because they have to make a bottom line. See, that's not customer centric already. So I'm on the phone with the lady about trying to address my rates. And she says, I really have no way to help you with that. And I said, well, who could help me with that? Who in the organization could help me with that? We've been a customer for 40 years. Who could help me with that? She said, I don't think anyone can help you with that. I said, well, is there anyone in your company that cares about the bottom line? Because here's what I want to tell you. Odds are I'm going to have this service in one way or another for at least another 30 years. At 30 years, at this amount of money on a monthly basis, and I told her what I would be expecting to pay for that, it comes to this amount of total dollars. You were talking about customer lifetime value as a measure, right? So here's my customer lifetime value for the last 40 years, and I'm calculating for her what the customer lifetime value would be for the next 30 years. I said, so here's your option. You can take advantage of the next 30 years of revenue from me, or I will stop being a customer of yours as soon as I figure out my alternative.
Yeah.
Is there anybody in your company that would like to have that conversation with me? And she said, no. And I said, okay, we're done talking, right? So we went on about our business and we found alternatives. There are plenty of alternatives today that are very good. And of course, the phone began to ring. All of a sudden, what happened? Why are you no longer a customer? What can we do? How can we get you back? So forth and so on. And I said, it's too late. We've already invested in an alternative technology. It's not going to happen. I had several conversations. It wasn't just one. Yeah. I asked to speak with someone and I could get nowhere, right? A bad example. An example of a company who probably could have done it much differently, much better, and would have had my business for another 30 years. And that would have been worth a lot of money. Just calculate somewhere around $100 a month, $1,200 a year, times 30 years, and you're talking thousands of dollars.
Since you briefly mentioned customer lifetime value, what do you think is a good way to go about it, both in the B2B space and also in the B2C space? Probably it's a little easier to calculate that in the B2C space. But what's your opinion? What is a good way to go about that?
I think it's not that hard to calculate in the B2B space, right? In fact, in the B2B space, people tend to build much more solid relationships if it's a true B2B. So in my mind, when I think of B2B and B2C, I think about the complexity of the sale, the number of people involved in the decision, the cost of what they're buying, right? So there are transactions in the world of B2B. One of my jobs early on was selling office supplies. That is a B2C type transaction, typically in a B2B world, right?
True.
So I'm really talking about true B2B transactions. And when you have true B2B transactions, people are going to be making an investment in the relationship. And it's not a short-term investment. Think about semiconductors. You put a semiconductor onto your car, into a circuit board on your car and your computer, odds are that's going to be running for a very long time in a particular platform. And changing that out is not that easy. A microprocessor out that's not an easy decision to make because there's a lot of implications. So calculating customer lifetime value is not that hard to do. And it's probably even more important in some ways, because if you lose that, it's going to be almost impossible to get it back.
True.
Right?
True.
So I think it's a very valuable measure. I think it's a critical measure. And I think, again, a customer-centric company will have some type of customer-centric measure at the top of it, as the KPI, as a key performance indicator for their company, whatever that might be. It could be some type of customer lifetime value or other KPI that, again, would be an indicator of whether or not that company is customer-centric, as they would have customer-oriented measures as KPIs for their company.
In your most recent book, Fast Track Your Business, you also talk about 23 questions to determine strategy for growth. Is there a way to pick, let's say, the top 3 questions, which are probably the most important, or does it completely depend on the situation or the business you're in?
So one of the things about the book that we tried really hard to do was make it very practical and give people tools. In fact, people who buy the book, they can get a free or assessment to determine how ready they are to do organic growth. So an organic readiness assessment, they can get that for free. So these questions were designed to help companies very quickly. They don't have to pay anybody or us to kind of go through and do sort of a self-checklist It's very different from the one that they can download. But quickly, where are their gaps? Where are their biggest gaps? And that's really the point, right? Is to make you think through, and it's a yes or no. It's not on a scale. It's not meant to be hard. It's meant to be a pretty quick gut check. And we recommend that if you're inside a company, that you have several different people take it and then just sort of compare. Where did we agree we have gaps? So that's its real purpose, is to begin and serve as a catalyst for internal conversations. So it's really not that there's 1, 2, or 3 that are more important than others. It's really about taking a moment, hitting pause, and using a tool that we've used for a very long time, and do your own kind of quick gut check and say, and compare that with other people in the company and say, wow, we did better than we thought, or wow, we didn't do as well as we thought, or wow, there's 4 or 5 questions here we all agree where we could probably do better. How are we going to go about doing that? So that's really the purpose of that worksheet. And I think that's like around page 52 or so in the book.
Yeah.
So we encourage people, just take the 15 minutes and fill it out, and just don't try to think too hard. What's your immediate response to that question?
Is the assessment on the website also similar to the one that's in the book?
It's a little bit more sophisticated type of assessment for people.
Okay, clear. Can you also talk a little bit about pricing and how that might figure into developing a growth strategy?
Yes. So obviously price is a part of a strategy. And there are different ways to approach price depending on where you are in your own company and where the product or offer solution is going to be in options or to customers, right? So if what you have is so new and there's very little competition and there's high barrier to entry, then you just need to make a decision. What is your goal? What is your initial goal? So there are a lot of companies who will say, I'm going to price this in an attractive way because I want to get as much traction as possible in the market as quickly as possible, right? So that I can basically maybe own this market, versus I don't need to do that because it's so necessary and so valuable to the people who will buy it that they're willing to pay, a premium for it. So really, it just comes down to doing your homework and understanding your customers and what the impact might be on your adoption rate. How important is the adoption rate as a measure of the product? And again, where is your company thinking in terms of where does this product fit in your long-term plan? Is it a beginning, a first stepping stone into a whole new business line, in which case you want to get people in and get it vetted and get it going? Or is it a one-off? What is its point? Is it a defensive move? Is it an offensive move? So there's a lot of things that go into making a decision about price. Lots and lots of decisions. And it is probably one of the more critical decisions, but it's also one of the easiest ones to change. You can change your price pretty easily. It's a lot easier to change than other things that you might have to do with the product, whether even software, which is relatively easy to just rewrite some code, right?
Yeah.
Right, as opposed to a product that is actually being manufactured inside a factory that has a form factor that might be a lot harder to make changes to. So price is probably one of the easiest things that you can test in a market and see what works. Yeah. It's great to experiment with price.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about data, because companies collecting a lot of data has become a lot more easier these days, and every single company is collecting tons of data. And depending on the use case, they are trying to segment that data and to build personas out of them. How do you make use of that to build great loyalty programs? Do you have some examples around that?
I do. And I come from that side of the house in marketing. I come out of the data science, marketing ops world of marketing, as opposed to the creative, programmatic side of marketing. So to your point, Rachit, you're exactly right. It is not there's no dearth of data today. But actually, I think that people struggle more with data today than we ever did early in my career, when data was more scarce and harder to get your arms around. I think there's such a proliferation of data, and it's so overwhelming that people often don't know what to do about it. In fact, we write about data a lot on our blog for that very reason. So I think that the most important thing when it comes to data, and then I'm going to come back to loyalty in a moment, is to understand the question you're trying to answer, right? So a lot of people start with, oh, let's look at all this data, see what it tells us, blah, blah, blah. That's great if you have the time and resources to do that. Most companies don't. So really, what problem are you trying to solve? What question are you trying to answer? What information do you need to answer that? That's really, and then do we have the data to answer that? That's really, in my mind, the way to approach data. Otherwise, you're just going to boil the ocean. True. And no one can afford that. Now, back to loyalty. So to your point, you're talking about how can we look at this customer data and really organize, if I'm understanding you correctly, organize that around customers. Whether that, do we organize that around the kinds of jobs they do? Do we organize that around the kinds of products they buy? Do we organize that around how often they buy? Do we organize it around the markets they're in? There's all different ways to look at and slice and dice data. And again, I think this comes back to when you say you want to build a loyalty program, why do you want to build a loyalty program? And who is it you want to be loyal? Everybody? A particular group that because they're very valuable, because they tend to be the ones who buy more often, because they tend to buy higher value, higher margin products? Mm-hmm. What is it that you are wanting them to be loyal? Who do you want to be loyal, and why do you want them to be loyal? And what is it you want them to do? That should be driving your loyalty initiative, right? So lots of companies have loyalty programs. We have loyalty programs at grocery stores, right? For those of us back in the B2C, but not every grocery store. So we have 2 grocery stores right down the street from, actually 3. One, they're all within about 3 miles of us. All of them are relatively local. One's Whole Foods, now owned by Amazon, but was a local organization. Now you have a loyalty program through Amazon Prime. Other than that, there was no loyalty program. But people went there, and we went there, and we still go there, even though we don't have that, because of what they offer, right? Of the products they offer. You know, when we're kind of looking for something a little bit different. But then we also have 2 Texas stores, and HEB, which as far as I know has no loyalty program and has probably one of the most loyal customer bases around. And then Randall's, which has a loyalty program that, right, and Randall's, if you're a member, you get better pricing on some of the products, right, than other times, than people who are not.
Yeah.
We go to all 3 of those. It makes absolutely no difference which one we have a card to or don't have a card to. 0 difference for us. It is really a matter of they carry a product we like or they don't. Yeah. They're conveniently located on the path or they're not, right? So again, and everyone has to eat. This is why I chose this particular example. We all eat. Almost all of us at some point or another have got to go to a grocery store of some kind, right?
Yeah.
So it's not a question of loyalty. Everyone has to eat. So when you're thinking about loyalty, what is it? Does it really make sense to have a loyalty program? As far as I know, HEB doesn't have a loyalty program, but clearly they have loyalty. So you don't actually have to have a loyalty program to create loyal advocates among your customer base. And we love our HEB. And every time I talk to people about HEB, they say, we love our HEB. In fact, you will hear that. We love our HEB. Right? So when you're thinking about doing a loyalty program, I think, again, it comes down to why are you doing a loyalty program? Do you have a loyalty problem or not? Mm-hmm. And you think a loyalty program is going to solve your loyalty problem? Odds are a loyalty program is not going to solve a loyalty problem.
That's true. That's true. That's a very fascinating way to look at it.
That's, I think, my message here about loyalty programs. Now, I've designed some loyalty programs in my career, and we help our customers build loyalty programs. But we always start with that question. Why do you want one? And who do you want to have be loyal? And why do you particularly want that group? Right. So I think those are some things to think through.
Correct.
So as far as I know, back to Keurig, maybe they have a loyalty program. I don't think they do, though. But I'm a loyal customer. The majority of my coffee purchases are made through Keurig. On the other hand, if I'm getting low and I don't see a really good offer, or I just don't have time, or I see something that catches my fancy with K-cups in the store, I'll just add them to my cart and go home, and I don't even think about it. So it isn't a lack of loyalty to Keurig. It is about, that looks interesting. So HEB, back to HEB, has started their own coffee line, and it's really, really good. It's a Texas coffee line in K-cups. And you don't get them on Keurig.
So better, yeah.
Yeah. It's got nothing to do with not being loyal to Keurig. Yeah. It just has to do with this great brand that HEB has created, and it's really tasty.
Let's switch gears a little bit and talk about the B2B scheme of things, because if I'm not mistaken, predominantly your experience has been on the B2B side.
Yes.
And when we talk about B2B, a lot of times it eventually comes down to talking about product features or professional services offered on top of those products. How can B2B companies or brands beware from becoming a commodity?
That's a great question. And I do think that a lot of brands are facing the potential of becoming a commodity. In fact, we have a blog post on, are your products into a commodity? So I think I use a really good example, and I'm going to use it here. It has to, what is it besides your product that distinguishes or gives value to your customer? This is the real question, right? The goal is to create value for your customer. And if you don't understand what the customer values, it's kind of hard to do that. And to your point, you say, well, they might value the features and functionality. Maybe not, because today it's not that hard for many, many companies face challenges of how rapidly companies can make a similar product, right? Then, so if you don't understand what your customers value, you're going to run into challenges. So I'm going to use this example. It's not a B2B example, but it's an example from that I often use as to make this point. When I was growing up, my mother, who had not learned to drive until she got married, which was not uncommon back then, and when we would go driving, sometimes she would have to get gas. Usually my father would make sure there was gas, but when we had to get gas, no matter where we were in town, we always went to the same gas station, no matter what. Right? No matter what, we always went to the same gas station because she knew the people there and they knew her. She would pull in and they would always say hello to her. Hello, Mrs. Tolpan. How's Dave, my father? If we were in the car, they would ask about us, right? They always checked her tires. They always checked her oil. They did all these other things besides put gas in the car. And my mother never filled up her tank herself, because back then, service stations really meant you had someone else fill your tank up, right? So now I tell the story that my mother's quite capable and she does fill up her own tank, right? When self-service came along and it's all about convenience, you fill up your own tank and you pay for it and you don't need to be bothered with all these people. But what happened? My mother doesn't care anymore where she went to get gas. Now she just looks to see which gas is the cheapest. Yeah. Now she looks to see, oh, I'm low. There's a gas station on every corner. They're all the same price. Which one's easiest to pull in and doesn't have anybody waiting? These are the things that she thinks about. She doesn't think about the people anymore. She doesn't think about the service anymore. She knows no one's going to check her oil. She knows no one's going to check her tires, right? They turn themselves. These companies turn themselves into a commodity. So now you have price wars all the time. Back to your question about price, to bring people in. What are the other benefits? So they're trying to come up with other value, like the gas and its quality to your car and so forth and so on. But these don't resonate very often with people. And they try to build loyalty programs. There's another example, right, where they try to build loyalty programs. So my point is, really understand what it is your customers value. That is what allows you to keep from becoming a commodity.
Employee centricity, a lot of companies talk about that. How do you tie that back to customer centricity?
Mm-hmm. It's a great question. First of all, if you don't treat your employees well, they're not going to treat customers well.
Correct.
Okay, let's just face it. If you just start an unhappy employee, that's going to definitely shine through in the way, come through in the way you interact in those moments of truth, right? Now, everybody has a bad day, and we all, have things going on in their lives, and sometimes that comes through in their interactions with a customer. Hopefully not often. I mean, I think those of us who have spent their lives in customer-facing jobs, and I have learned that we need to compartmentalize that. Yeah, I may have a bad day, and one more Zoom meeting is not what I really want to do today, but that's my issue, not theirs. My job is to make them be successful and not have that noise in my head when I'm talking to them. I think, it's about how so you want to make sure that you are treating employees in a way that they will be the kind of employees that will treat your customers well. So what does that look like? And how do you make sure that you're doing that? But I think also, going back to culture, is how do you make sure that your employees are treating customers well? What is it you do to let them know that that's what you expect of them, that you expect them to treat customers well? And that when the phone, you're thinking you're done for the day, but someone calls to answer the phone, right? We have a lot of people who, as employees, and I think this is an interesting dynamic, are struggling with their loyalty to the company, right?
Yeah.
So there's a loyalty issue going on in the contract. There's definitely concerns about the contract that is taking place between companies and employees. And that contract needs to be kind of looked at, because it is a contract, right, that you are making when you become an employee. Sure. But part of the contract you make when you become an employee is that you will do the right thing for the company. And so there is something that is required on both ends. So all I'm trying to say here is, back to culture. If you don't tell and act as though customers matter to you, it's going to be really hard for your employees to act as though customers matter to them, right?
Yeah.
So you have to kind of model the way, and you have to make it very clear from the moment they become an employee what your priorities are. People I worked for in my career, and I hope my people understand that, customers first. Customers first. Whatever it is that's on your plate, if a customer calls and needs something, customers first. That's a kind of a message in our company. It's a message for me, customers first.
Laura, you're the author of 3 books. What are some of your top favorite reads? What are some book recommendations?
So I love Moments of Truth. I highly recommend it. It was written by the CEO of Scandinavian Airlines. It's back in the 90s. I think it's as pertinent today as it was then. Love that book. I encourage everyone to read it and understand what Moments of Truth are for your company. The other book I love that was written also in the 90s, and I know these are old books, but I think they are as relevant today as they were then, maybe more so, is The One Thing. It's a great book. It was written by the CEO of Keller Williams. It's called The One Thing, and it's a great book. And I think it's still in print and in bookstores, readily available. So those are 2 books I highly recommend anyone read that is in a business.
And with that, I think in the interest of time, we should wrap. Thank you for your time, Laura. This was a lot of fun.
It was fun. It was my pleasure. Thank you so much for thinking of me, Rachit. Really enjoyed it.